Hey, everybody. I love double entendres, but imagine this one, bringing hip hop to school. My guest today is doing that literally. Yeah, literally, an overused word, but he really is. And I think this is really cool. He's the first professor of hip hop in the country, which probably means the world if I was taking a wild guess, but we can have him clarify that for sure. He's the groundbreaking professor of hip hop at the University of Virginia. That's pretty progressive and cool to start this whole new genre of education. He's not only a scholar, he's a performer, he's an educator. His work is bridging hip hop, social commentary, consciousness, storytelling, and much more. He's challenging art, identity, and legacy. If that's not all, he's the author also of a book that's coming out called Being Dope. I know a lot of people would like to read that one, starting with me. And as if that's not all enough, rumor has it he's up for 4 Grammys. So let's give it up for Dr. A.D. Carson, and I'm ready to learn more. Hello.
Peace, peace. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Okay. I'm not even sure where to start because you've got one heck of a resume. But let's start with this. Why do you like hip hop? How do you define hip hop versus other genres?
So I don't think that genres exist in the way that we believe they do. I
Mm.
believe that the thing that's going on when people are telling you about like musical genres that get sold, say like bluegrass or country, and even going back to Tin Pan Alley, they're really trying to tell you either who is making the music or who is consuming the music. And so it's really all about the bodies of either the performers or the audience. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you imagine that time period when the world was shifting from disco and going into what was called hip hop, a lot of those early hip hop records were recorded to disco beats.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
can
the
still
reason,
sing the Sugar Hill Gangs and a hip
exactly,
hop.
yeah, yes. And so that is to say that a lot of what became hip hop was borrowed from what were perceived as other genres. And so in my head, hip hop is more about the process of how a thing gets made rather than the product that is being made. So some of my students sing, some of them write uh, poetry. Some of them play classical instruments or whatever. But when they're in a class with me, the process of making a hip hop album doesn't require them to learn how to rap necessarily. It
Mhm.
does require them to learn how to make something new out of what they bring into the situation. And so hip hop historically has been about taking what is familiar and making it unfamiliar through the process of reinvention,
Mhm.
or taking something that is unfamiliar and then making it familiar through that same process of reinvention.
You make such interesting points about, how music gets lumped into categories
Hmm.
and how, they often blur into each other. And
Hmm.
I have a 22-year-old son who's very into hip hop, as
Hmm.
are all his friends. And I sent him something, uh, It's Tricky by Run
Yeah.
DMC the
Yeah.
other day. I said, this is the hip hop I grew up with. It's
Hmm.
very different than what he's listening to.
Hmm.
And it's always fascinating to me how broad you know, how things try to get narrowed down by people, yet how really broad they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Not, and it's not just the broadness of it. I mean, I think that when people are using, and I think intentionally using a term like hip hop culture,
Mhm.
really what they're trying to signal is that there is a cultural movement that we could call hip hop, which includes at least, rapping, DJing, breakdancing, and visual art, like graffiti and tagging.
Mhm.
And and when we conflate rap music or rapping with all of hip hop, then we cut off, well, at least 75% of what folks were trying to describe as hip hop culture. And
Mhm.
so I imagine, I mean, I know that there are people who have broadened the scope of what they call hip hop so that, you know, some people say there are 5 pillars. Other people say that there are 9 pillars, because it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, because hip hop has been influencing the world in ways I think that were unimaginable at the time that folks were trying to sketch out what, you know, like what hip hop encompassed in the early 1970s. So yeah, it makes
I was
sense
gonna
that,
ask you that. When do you think the birth of what would be classified as the early stages of hip hop started? And how would you define that birth? Culturally, musically? You mentioned graffiti,
yeah,
which is one of my favorite things in the city, which is unpopular, but I just do love it.
yeah.
It
So
defines neighborhoods to me, defines personalities, but I'm
yeah,
curious.
every time I travel, I look for graffiti. Like I want to go where the art is, and it's the most accessible art in any city, in any
Yeah,
city.
same with me.
So I mean, so this is one of the reasons that I wrote the book is because I think that we could learn a lot about the way that we do American history by paying attention to the way that hip hop histories get told. And
Mm,
so I can tell you that a thing happened in August of 1973 on Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. And that is the date that people generally use to mark the beginning of hip hop. So when we talk about hip hop's 50th anniversary, that's what folks were talking about. That date, that back to school party happened, and it was thrown by Clive Campbell and his sister Cindy. Clive Campbell is DJ Kool Herc, and so there's that. But then if you read just a little bit, then you will find all kinds of examples of things that we might call hip hop. Or if you're reading the description, say in Eldridge Cleaver's Soul on Ice, which predates that party in 1973,
mhm.
and is in a geographically different place. And he's describing someone who is standing in a circle, performing rhymed lines with tears streaming down his face, talking about what's happening in California. That sounds a whole lot like a freestyle cipher to me.
Yeah.
But then we could probably go back even further, because as I was talking to students the other day, like I'm like, well, I mean, when we're listening to Beowulf, or when we're reading Beowulf, and they're outside the mead hall, and they are like in this competition of like braggadocio and one-upsmanship, that sounds a whole lot like rapping too. Like the whole thing is in couplets, it's all rhymed.
Yeah.
So so I feel like we could probably challenge the notion that there is a beginning date, and just kind of look at the traditions and how those things evolved. And not to, because I don't want to hitch hip hop's wagon to Beowulf necessarily. I think that if you read someone like Henry Louis Gates, he would say that at the turn of the century, like the early 1900s, people like his granddad were doing a thing that was very similar to what we call rap. And so while someone might say that in the early 1980s or the late 1970s, that was the first time hip hop was on television, or the first time rap was on television, I'm pretty sure that on the Tonight Show in 1967, there was Pigmeat Markham performed "Here Comes the Judge," and
Mhm.
if you listen to it, it sounds like an improvised rap song.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that, like, if we were to look at July 4th, 1776, something happened that day. There was a thing that happened, but there are all kinds of ideas that existed before that day, and we use that day to mark the thing that happened. But to like call it a birth, I think is kind of it's not as accurate as we would want it to be. And so my thesis is that if we were to pay attention to these shorter histories and the ways that they get blurry the closer you get to the date, to the actual events, then we might be better about the thing that we call history, so that we're not trying to curate a thing that is is trying to solidify a kind of like fierce regionalism, or like what has come to be known as like a kind of nationalism. And then we get to the nitty gritty. So then we can start talking about people who influenced what became the thing that we describe as the birth. And that, I don't know, I think that just seems to be a little bit better, but because, I mean, it's more comprehensive because the way that we do it, it makes it seem like there was one person, one event, one thing.
Right.
And then we would assume
The
that
movement.
the DJ for that party in August, like, well, what was he doing in September? If he was learning the DJ, like if he was learning the DJ, or, what was he doing in January?
Mm-hmm.
If that, like, if he's learning the thing that he's going to be performing there, isn't he already starting the thing? Isn't the thing already started? Doesn't it predate the actual event? And so I get it. We need those things, but these are questions that I think are, I mean, if we're thinking more comprehensively, one of the questions I think about history and about civilization is like, when does history begin? Does it begin when somebody starts writing it down, or does it begin at some point previous to that? And so we have this much
and then you get into who wrote it down.
Correct. And who they saw as worthy of writing about. Yeah. And so the hip hop history can help us understand larger national histories and world histories.
Question. You say hip hop and you say rap.
Yep.
Do you think of them as one and the same, or is hip hop a cultural theme?
Yep.
With a variety of baskets within it? And if so, what might be those baskets?
Yeah, correct. That's what I was saying just a minute ago, that hip hop is the, like, sort of the umbrella. And under that umbrella is rap, graffiti art, DJing, and breakdancing. Some people say entrepreneurism, other people say style as well. And, like knowledge of self. Like I said, there are some traditions that look at it as 4 elements. And then there are some that say there are 5 elements, all the way up to 9 pillars. And I'm pretty sure that there are other folks who have expanded that even more. But at its most basic, there are 4 elements of hip hop, and rap is one of them.
How do you break down teaching hip hop at the college level?
Well, I mean, I come from a tradition of teaching writing more generally to, children as early as kindergarten, and as as late as advanced level graduate students. And so I've taught composition for elementary school kids, or composition for high school students. I mean, and this is just like the 5-paragraph essay, or how to write a technical document like a resume or an application letter. And so my PhD is in rhetorics, communication, and information design. And all of my teaching assistantships during that time were in English departments teaching composition. I've worked in writing centers as well. And so as a rapper who is becoming an English teacher, becoming someone who's earning a bachelor's in literature and writing, and earning a master's in writing, that entire time I'm a rap writer. I write raps, and I write poetry, and I write like all of the kinds of forms that I think are important to me. And as I'm reading the literature about all of these other traditions, I'm realizing that there are absolutely poetics of hip hop or rap writing that might be beneficial for folks to learn in the ways that I learn them. And these things are different from the things that are going on in the classrooms that I'm in as a student. And so I believe that students can learn just as much from learning how to write raps, learning how to read raps, as they can from learning how to write a 5-paragraph essay, or learning how to write sonnets, or learning how to write sestinas or villanelles, or learning how to write short stories. And really what it means is that we are going to take the compositional elements and teach them the conventions and the grammars. But then we're going to also talk about how information gets encoded and decoded within that particular form. So, we know that if you are reading a haiku, that
Mhm.
like generally it has a set number of syllables, and the themes are something that we probably understand, that maybe it's about nature. Or if we're going to write a sonnet, we know that it has a definite number of lines and it has a number of syllables, and we
Mhm.
know that maybe it's about like love or interpersonal relationships.
Right.
Well, raps have those conventions in poetics as well. And so we can look at some of the
Can you
kinds of,
identify that?
yeah.
Like an
So
example of the style of the writing, like to break down this.
yes. Yeah, so if you're listening to a standard time beat, then you're going to get 4 beats, which is going to
Yeah.
happen across a certain amount of time. Those are the beats per minute. And so if I'm going to attempt to like rap with a triplet flow, that is the da 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 da, the da da da
Uh-huh.
da 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 da, then that means that I only have a certain number of spaces to be able to fit within those within those 4 beats. And so like I'm going to have to divide so that like whatever that number of syllables across that line has to be divisible by 3 in order for it to work.
You're teaching math, music, and writing all in one.
Yes, that is true. That is
I
true.
love it. I
Yeah,
mean, what a way to learn.
correct. And these are
And you're
things that are
firing up
happening.
all areas of the brain.
Yeah, and students are learning this stuff without ever having the benefit of a classroom or someone to give them instructions or to give them particular lessons that they might be able to have someone check. This is all really like trial and error. And so my job is to
Wait a second.
facilitate.
Before we get to what your job is, I want to ask, what was it like when you said to the University of Virginia, oh, so by the way, I have this idea for this new coursework. I
Yeah.
mean, what was the reaction to that?
Well, I think that UVA was all right with it because they were, like they put out the call for a professor of hip hop before I
Did they?
even. Yes, they so that but when I was working on my PhD, and my PhD dissertation was a rap album. I submitted music for this program in rhetorics, communication, and information design. It's a
Were
34
you
track
doing that
album.
at University of Virginia?
I was doing that at Clemson.
Clemson.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so and so the thing is, like, again, as I'm talking about the like sort of the compositional things, we also have to think about the content. So what does rap do? Like, what are the things? And a lot of it's not like a set of things that rap does, but I think that most understandings would say that rap gives us the ability very often to say things that are otherwise unsayable because of the appeal of the rhyme structure or the sonic engagement. And so in
Mhm.
a place like Clemson, which is literally a former plantation, like
Mhm.
enslaved people were kidnapped and held there and labored there. And the plantation house is open 7 days a week. Yet it's a really like there's this really strange tension where people don't talk as much or as openly about the fact that the land was bequeathed by a slaveholder to the state of South Carolina. And so you
Mhm.
can imagine how that would make things awkward because that plantation house sits on top of a hill. And if you've ever watched Clemson's football team play, you'll see them running down a hill onto the field before the game starts. At the apex of that hill is that plantation house that's even open on game days. So my thinking about that was like, well, hip hop would usually, the hip hop that I know would say something about that, would ask us
Right.
what's going on here and how might we reckon with whatever that might mean.
Mhm.
And so the contents of the album kind of spoke to what it's like to study literature, history, and all of these things through rap music at a place like Clemson from the years 27 or 2013 to 2017. And so there, it seemed like many people in the place, like whether they knew for sure that I was making a rap music dissertation or not, they thought I was an activist. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not an activist. I'm a hip hop artist. Which means that the thing that you see as activism is actually what I believe it means to be in community with people. That, I
Mhm.
mean, and so that, I mean, and that's a significant difference. It's incumbent upon me, if I'm going to be a hip hop artist in the traditions that I've received, to speak about the lived environment that we are all in, because I know that the work that I do has the power to intervene in some of these conversations that we believe that we can't have, which
Mhm.
meant that so there's a song on that album called "See the Stripes," because Clemson's mascot is a tiger, and yet on Fridays, before they have their spirit days, like they ask the people in the community to like wear solid orange. Now,
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that mascot or that concept, except that I know that I want us to talk about the history, and I want us to talk about the present, and maybe even change the future. And so my thinking as an artist is like, what if we saw our mascot, rather than being solid orange, we saw that it had stripes, that all
Mhm.
tigers have stripes? That's like a biological reality. And those stripes aren't necessarily black. And those stripes are not, they're also not like the color of their fur. That's just like that is how they are, created. So when I wrote the song "See the Stripes," it was just to take advantage of this mascot that hundreds of thousands of people know,
Mhm.
and to make that very familiar thing unfamiliar, so that I could intervene in that conversation that we needed to have about that plantation house, about that history of enslavement, about the history of sharecropping, about the ways that the student body interacts with the administration, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that was my primary goal there. And they found out, I mean, I won't say they found out later. Once folks, I guess, explicitly understood that my goal with music was to do that kind of thing, then I think
Mhm.
people understood a little bit better. Um, so yeah.
You know, hip hop seems to have there was a good interview I listened to in a car one time, and then it was on the tanning of America.
Mm-hmm.
And the merger of cultures, and hip hop, I mean, is clearly crossing over all cultures. You see it in
Mm-hmm.
the United States. You could go to a hip hop concert. I could look at Madison Square Garden. I mean, it's everybody's outside of that place waiting to get in.
Yeah.
What do you equate that to? That
Well,
unifying force?
yeah. So I think that it is, I mean, in the book, the metaphor being dope is actually about, I mean,
And
like,
who doesn't want to be dope?
correct. Except that there's this way, like, even as we now like understand that like the so-called war on drugs of the 1990s, and the way that it might differ from like what we have now that we might call like an opioid crisis, that
Mhm,
there's a long history in this country, um that like to the present, that like we understand drugs. Everybody in this country has a relationship to drugs because the country has a relationship to drugs. And whether it's the administration um, trying to stop people from bringing drugs into the country by blowing up boats, or it is like making certain drugs into controlled substances, and or prohibiting the consumption of alcohol. We have this
mhm,
really long history of policing what is and is not legal, or is not sanctioned.
mhm,
I believe that this history, again, like I said, with genres, is really something that we can expand as a metaphor to think about people, to think about the country's relationship to whiteness and what we understand as blackness. And what I mean there is not like really racial so much as
mhm,
um, trying to codify these things that we call racial categories, which I
mhm,
think all of the research at this point says race is not a biological reality, but there is a social reality that we do abide by. And that social
mhm,
reality is about sanctioning and not sanctioning, or saying who belongs in this category, who doesn't belong in this category. So who is called dope and who is not called dope, I think, is a thing that goes all the way back to who gets called human and who's not called human. And so
mhm,
on the one hand, people are saying that that these people who we've enslaved are not human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But if we take their music, or we take their culture, or we take their agricultural
Prowess.
methods,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things, and then we make them into an American product. We make it into, like American farming, and really, like,
Mm-hmm.
making it into American farming is just changing the category of person that you believe is making the thing, is doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So pop culture, like, if we can do these cover records, and we can take these songs that were collected, and then we sing them, we are, and then also only give copyrights to the people who can write the songs down. So the person who made the song, or who sings the song, can be the source of the song, but can't be the
Mm-hmm.
author of the song.
Yeah.
All of that is the process of becoming dope, or being dope, which kind of means that rather than looking at and again, I'm saying that this is all the way through American culture. So we look
Mm-hmm.
at films like Scarface, or like King of New York, or New Jack City, and you have these drug kingpins um, who are lauded as larger than life characters. Well,
Mm-hmm.
my contention would be like would be that when rappers are talking about those characters, that there is a thing that's going on. People say, well, why do rappers like always glorify these people? My question in response to that is, well, the United States of America glorifies these people, because in my metaphor, the real kingpins were Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and those guys who were signing that declaration, who all were importing, or had imported people, and were selling those people's labor as
Mm-hmm.
a product, or selling those people's bodies as a product. And so what I
Mm-hmm.
mean about being dope now is that there are some people who get sanctioned, and there are other
Mm-hmm.
people whose labor, or whose work, or whose bodies are sold as a product. And
Mm-hmm.
that is like I think the best example of that is in music.
How in music? Because
Um,
I mean, certainly we have seen people get totally ripped off
yeah,
in the music publishing industry. That historically has happened forever. You know,
yes,
I mean, and that goes across all everybody in music. We could say everybody in Hollywood to Detroit. I mean, it's
yep,
always been who can you I mean, Prince talked about it, saying
mhm,
he was enslaved by his record company.
correct,
George Michael said the same thing,
yep.
so that kind of stuff has gone on. So how do you mean that, doctor?
Yeah. So that means that so if we were looking at like record company owners,
Mhm.
then we're just talking about, like, again, these classes of people who own a whole lot of property, or hold a whole lot of wealth, and trying to make sure that the people who they're exploiting, so that they can earn that wealth, continue to be exploited, or strive to be exploiters themselves. And so it makes sense that an artist who makes music might say, I'm going to become a label owner, and that's how I'm going to get the same kind of money that people were getting off of me. And so the process repeats. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like, I mean,
So
basically
is
it's
that
how
becoming dope? Is that humanity? Is
I
that an
think,
assessment of just plain humans seem to want to control each other, whether it's via war, forms of slavery, whether it's in the workplace, in the, you know,
yeah,
culturally, it's an interesting topic of discussion. And I
yeah,
bet it gets really interesting in the classroom.
yes, for sure. So that particular process is not necessarily becoming dope, but it is getting into the dope trafficking game. That
Mhm.
you are a person who was treated as the product, and now you're like, I want some products to treat, or I
Right.
want some people to make into products. So I think that, like, what I'm saying is, I want to own the things that I do.
Mhm.
I want to be treated as a person who has the ability to talk about myself. I don't need a prescription written about me. I don't
Right.
need a law written to sanction me. I don't need an act, or an amendment to say that I am human. What I
Mhm.
need is for you to be true to your word when you said that we all were human and had inalienable rights.
Right.
However, the history tells a different story. And so part of what I'm talking about with being dope is the history and the present, and challenging us, if we were to think about it through this metaphor, to say like, well, when I am trying to become a record label owner, am I trying to become a record label owner in order to treat people more humanely? Or am I trying to become a record label owner to enrich myself?
Mm-hmm.
And those are very different things, because even if you don't see it as racial or you don't see it as exploitative, it's going to require an engagement with this racial history and with this exploitative history. And so, of course, someone like George Michael can be exploited as well. And of course, someone like any pop artist who's not making rap music can be exploited. But if we look at the history of pop music in this country, we can't have a conversation about that without talking about the racial politics of it, the gendered politics of it. And if we have a conversation about copyright, it's impossible to have a conversation about copyright given what I just said about how some people could be sources for music while others could be authors of that same music. That's absolutely a conversation about racial dynamics, about gender dynamics, about embodiment. Who gets the right to own the legal documents that call thoughts property, intellectual property? Yeah, and so I think that it's also a much easier way into some of these conversations that we very often find difficult, because people will, maybe say, well, everybody's too interested in making everything about race. Everybody's too interested in talking about divisive subjects. And my response to that is, well, I don't have a whole lot of difficult conversations. They might be a little uncomfortable, but it's not difficult to say that the history of American popular music has racial dynamics. That's just being accurate about what is good. It's like saying that American history has some issues with race. Saying that is not difficult. Hearing that might feel a little bit awkward. I'm not trying to make you feel bad about it, but we also have to understand that the purpose of telling history is not to make people feel good, it's to inform people.
Inform and hopefully not repeat the things that weren't great, that you don't feel proud of, that make you feel uncomfortable. I mean, when I started blogging almost 8 years ago, and it was when Trump and Hillary were running the first time. And and everyone started to get everyone had a political comment. It was becoming divisive, and my hair was white. I called it silver, but I co-opted Martin Luther King's, civil disobedience, and said, I'm going to be silver disobedience. I am going to try to raise conversations civilly. In maybe it's a disobedient way because people don't want to talk about it. So just push it over here. But let's talk and prove that you can have great conversations without shouting, that you can actually ask some good questions. I mean, you're informing me of some really interesting perspectives right now.
And I think that is that's something. Music is always for me been an entryway into many of those conversations, and the reasons that I believe that they don't register as difficult is because there's genuine interest in how we got here, or there's genuine interest in how how those drum sounds were made, or how those samples come to be new creations, whatever the particular thing might be. And so students come to class believing that they know a lot about hip hop, and then they leave hopefully feeling that they know a lot more about the world. And, at its best, I think that this is what the work that I want to do brings into a space like academia. That the students absolutely are, the students in my lab so often are coming in during their times that they're not scheduled to be in the lab. I
believe it.
Yeah, they have class, and then I don't know, they're hanging out or whatever it may be, and then they come by, and then they're just there. I have one student who several times a former student who several times this semester has gotten up at 9 o'clock and sat in on all of the classes during the day, just
That's
because.
progress with anyone of that age to get them
Yeah.
up so they sit around.
Yeah. And so undergraduate students sit in on grad seminars all the time. We're having these conversations. And there's this thing that happens where a young person who might have never thought of themselves as academic, or might have never thought of themselves as someone who's going to get an advanced degree, they're like, so what would it take to get a PhD? Or what would it take to get a master's degree? Would you be willing to look over my application materials? And if education isn't supposed to do that, I don't know what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. And well, talking to you, I find it very inspiring talking to you. So I can imagine you really enrolling students in a classroom. And like I said, one of the things, if you look at education, and I talk to a lot of educators, because I found traditional education very frustrating personally.
Yeah.
And I think it's because everything's so segmented. You have your English class over here, you have your history class over here, math over here, science over here, philosophy over here. Everything I'm hearing you say is this like cluster
Yes.
that makes somebody interlearn, if that's such a word. Probably not, but I invent them regularly. But
Word.
if you're thinking about beats, okay, and you have quarter notes versus half notes versus three, and trying to get the words to fit in there and tell a story and look at history and relay what's happening in your love life or your neighborhood or the world.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. One of the things I want to talk to you about is, so much has changed in the world. And this is in some ways maybe out of your scope, but maybe it's exactly in what you're teaching and what you're experiencing as you're up for 4 Grammys, which I want to talk about as well, is you have a lot of people saying, I'm going to just rep my own music.
Yeah.
And obviously, there was a point that everybody needed the record label, but it was very hard to get to the record label.
Yeah.
Now you see people don't even put together records. They put out singles, and, in an afternoon, a new single's out. And then the next day, maybe they went back, some event happened and they have the next single. So it's a very different landscape. What are you observing with this as someone who's more professional than I am?
I think that what's happening there, the changes are it's like technological shifts, that music is always followed technology, and in a lot of ways it has led with technology. And what I mean is that like during the 1860s, you had during the 1860s, pre-emancipation, like lots of people were entertained by the people who they held captive, and then that turns into the period where people are dressing up like those entertainers on plantations, and doing the thing that we call like minstrelsy, and then that evolves, and eventually after emancipation, then some Black people are also engaging in blackface minstrelsy, because that is what the popular appetite is at the time. And so you have these performance circuits where there are audiences who do not want to invite Black performers in, and so they have white people dress up like Black people, and then there are these other audiences. And then of course
that one always, like, I could never reconcile. I'm like, that's just the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah, but I think that it's because there's the social stigma against sharing space with people while also being absolutely entertained by the kind of music that those people made. And so this again is like kind of like the dope metaphor. It's like you want the product that the people produce, but you don't want the people that are associated with the product there.
Can you define the word dope in a sentence?
Well, dope is just
I looked it up in the Urban Dictionary. What would your definition be?
The first definition of the first page of the book gives like the New York Times definition of the word, and it kind of talks about how people have used it to talk about drugs, because historically it was related to drugs, and then it just became a term just like bad, or a term like cool, that that was ultimately like used as a stand-in for something that might be good. But before that, there was a period where calling someone a dope would be an insult. And so it just kind of speaks to the pliability of American English and the ways that people have subverted the language so that they might take a thing that sounds bad or negative and make it into really like the benchmark for cool.
You know, along that line, I'm going to ask you a question. Why are words that make me cringe used in rap songs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that this kind of has to do with, when I talk about being able to say the unsayable
Mhm,
in public,
mhm,
some of it has to do with I mean, there are a lot of different registers that are going at once. And one of those might be, if someone says to me that my rap music, they don't understand my rap music and they're turned off by the offensive words that I use in my rap music.
mhm,
What I might say in response is that is absolutely intentional. If you are not committed to understanding what I'm doing, then you're not my audience.
mhm,
And so that's a way to alert an audience to listen while also like doing the work of telling another audience, well, they don't have to pay attention, or they'll say, I'm turned off by that, so I'm literally not going to hear the rest of what you're saying. Now, there's history to this as well. There were times when people were enslaved where they might be singing a song in a field and people were like, oh, that's such a beautiful song, and it sounds like they're singing about religion, they're singing about salvation, and
right.
then like they wake up later on that evening or the next day and those people are gone. And those people
Mm,
with that song that made those people who heard it stop
mhm,
paying attention because they said Jesus, or because
mm.
they said coming for to carry me home, those people stopped listening, and the song was literally the way they organized their escape. And so hip hop is doing
Great
that.
clarifying answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, it's doing that. It's just that like we have so many different ways to get people to tune in and tune out. And I would imagine if I'm a person who's interested in talking to a young person and that young person is playing music that is offensive to me, my thought wouldn't be to tell that person not to play that music. My thought would be to ask that young person, what is it
Oh,
they're hearing?
yes.
What's going on there that is drawing you in? Because there's something that's telling me not to listen, which makes me think that there's something that is telling you to absolutely listen. And I want to know that. And so that opens a conversation for me with a young person that I might not be able to have, because again, they're listening to the unsayable thing. And if it's unsayable, then there's no way that I'm going to know what the thing is unless I ask.
Can everybody sing the same lyrics?
Well, I think that in this country, in the social realities that we have, I imagine anybody can sing the same lyrics. I don't think that everybody's going to get the same responses if they do sing the same lyrics.
Mhm,
And what I mean by that is that like the so-called N-word, it's not like that word is owned by people of color. It was not even invented by people of color. That's a
mhm,
descriptor that people used before the people that they brought here could even describe themselves. And
mhm.
so, like, if you invented a word, of course you can use it. But if you invented that word for all of the causes that we associate with that word, my question would be, why do you even want to use it now?
Mhm.
Because you invented it? So, okay, sure. You can do that, but there will be social consequences probably, because there are some people who say, hey, we don't say that anymore, or we don't
Right.
use that in that way. But you don't get to tell other people what their relationship to that word that was used to describe them should be.
That's a great answer. That's a
Yeah.
great answer. Where do you think, if you were gonna use your crystal ball,
Uh-huh.
how do you think, because hip hop, um, rap in particular has certainly evolved. As you said, we could look at, earlier rap to what's
Mm-hmm.
happening now, the multi-genres, from
Mm-hmm.
mumble rap to where you can clearly hear something, to stuff that
Yeah.
sounds more like humming, but or just the beats,
Yeah.
the sampling and everything that's happening, which you could
Mm-hmm.
obviously define better. I'm getting it straight through my my 20-something-year-old children's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
where their playlist is now my playlist because they're still on my iTunes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, where do you think it's going?
I think that it's going where we're going,
Uh-huh.
and so if we are, if we keep moving toward, like this, I don't know, like this flirtation with post-humanism, with AI and machine learning, et cetera, then I imagine it's not that I don't think that it's really, I wouldn't look at Meta and Apple and, like the big corporations to see where it's going, because those are the people, again, like who are kind of like overseers, or who are like in that class of folks that will take the thing that's being made and then try to make a lot of money off of it. I mean,
Mhm.
that's how we got to music streaming.
Yeah.
But there will be some people who are sitting around on their computers innovating with AI or innovating with machines, and
Mhm.
someone's going to find a way to make that into a bankable product, and then that's going to be where we go. And so I think that we can follow the technology, not the technology companies, but follow what regular people are doing with the technology, and that is very likely going to be where the innovation happens, because again, it will be a case of someone taking something that is somewhat familiar and making it unfamiliar through the process of transformation, or they're going to take something that's unfamiliar and then make it familiar through that same process. I believe that that's absolutely where music will go more generally. But like my understanding of hip hop over the past 50 plus years leads me to believe that hip hop will be one of the places where that innovation absolutely happens.
Now, you've got your teaching, you've got a
Hmm.
book, and you're up for 4 Grammys.
Hmm.
What categories and what does that look like?
I think one is best rap album. One
Album.
is yeah, and one is classical crossover. Maybe I think it's classical crossover, mixing and engineering. And so I recorded an album with the Charlottesville Symphony. It was a live engagement. They commissioned a piece for their 50th anniversary concert, and so I wrote with Ben Rouse, the conductor, this piece called "And Metaphors." And is spelt with the ampersand. And we
Mhm.
and I thought, well, because we are doing this huge orchestral thing, and there's so many people who are involved to make something like this happen, and both nights of the performance were sold out. We're going to release this album, and hopefully the people who weren't in the room get an opportunity to at least feel some of the energy
Mhm.
that came through whenever we were putting that piece together. And really working with the symphony was a matter for me of, again, doing the thing that I think hip hop does. I don't want to stand up in front of a stage or on stage at Old Cabell Hall and have the orchestra play instrumentals of my songs. I
Mhm.
want us to make something together. And that thing that we make together is something that we share with an audience, so that the thing that gets performed is an entirely new piece that
Mhm.
comes from that process, that hip hop process that I'm talking about, of transformation. And I think that we realize that. And if a Grammy is if a Grammy is a byproduct of that, cool. But it's absolutely not about the Grammy to me. It's absolutely much more
But you
about,
did it.
yeah, the
I
work
mean,
that we.
what a concept.
Yes, yeah. And so it was great. I mean, I really appreciated it. I appreciated that Ben, the co-writer, was the composer. Like that we were able to collaborate, and I mean truly
Mhm.
collaborate on the piece, so that that we did a thing that neither of us could do on our own.
Mhm.
And I think that that's just incredibly important for me as a collaborator. What it means to be in community with people is not to like make them do what I want them to do, or them have me do what they want me to do, but for us to like say, what do we bring to the table? And so in a real way, I hope that Ben and I modeled what we want our students to do whenever they collaborate with one another. You're just
Yeah.
asking people, what are the things that you bring into the situation, and how might we combine those things so that we can make something new?
You're talking about collaboration and what you're teaching.
Mhm.
Can you say what your curriculum is?
Yeah.
Like, how do you break down what you're teaching? Because you're
Mhm.
teaching a lot. You've now talked about another thing. You're adding the collaboration, which
Yeah.
is a business lesson into the whole mix, and a
Uh-huh.
social lesson at the same time.
Yeah. So
You
right now,
cover
like
a lot.
the primary classes that I teach, like this semester, I'm teaching writing rap and the Black voice. And the Black
Mhm,
voice is a class not really about like Blackness as a racial category, but about like that history that I was telling you about,
mhm,
going all the way back to, like pre-United States.
mhm,
um, and how the phenomenon of believing that we can hear race even becomes an idea, because we believe
mhm,
that race has a sound, even though it's so difficult to define.
mhm,
And so we're talking about how we get to those definitions, and how those definitions often fail because they are really meant to do something else. That, like
mhm,
race isn't only a visual phenomenon; it is also, and maybe as much, a sonic phenomenon.
mhm,
Writing rap, I teach those. And so I'm sorry, in the Black voice class, we read a lot of history and theory,
mhm.
and current events. In writing rap, we read poetics texts. We also read about histories of hip hop. And so each week there's one lesson on history and one lesson on a particular convention or writing technique. And so they get history and composition each week. And every week there is a live performance that the students can engage in. So they either play a recording that they made, or they perform a verse that they've written. And so there's a microphone set up in the class, and it's set up like a cipher. So they get to cipher with one another and experience that kind of thing. And then in the spring, I'll be teaching a graduate seminar, again, on listening practices. But then I teach a class called Composing Mixtapes. And in that class, there are anywhere from 10 to 20 students who are tasked with making an album together. They have to write, produce, record, master, and release an album. And they get 16 weeks to do it. And so ultimately, those classes together give students a kind of comprehensive engagement with the kinds of stuff that I do in my professional life, but under the umbrella of like the rap lab as a space of learning, rather than the harsh lights of like the real professional world. And
Right.
so yeah, so they get to kind of pilot
I was gonna
through.
say that could be a reality TV show.
Oh, for sure it
Putting
could.
a
It
bunch
could.
of kids together and
Yes.
say, "Okay, you got 16 weeks to come up with your multi-track album." Wow.
Yes. Yes, it could. I mean, the students, once there was a
Just the
reality.
personality merging.
Yeah, there was a reality TV show that was about that, like, from probably, I don't know, like 20 years ago. And the students, the very first class of composing mixtapes that I had, the students um, brought me a cheesecake on the last day to kind of like to like, I guess, a parody of that television show, which was kind of funny. That they know, I mean, I do love cheesecake, but the reason they did it was because because they'd seen that television show. So that's kind of funny.
Well, it's funny, that's why I get to record from Manhattan Center, because when I met everybody about almost 25 years ago here, I had wanted to put musical groups
Uh-huh.
in different apartments in New York,
Wow.
and then bring in music producers, 2 totally different kinds of music
Yeah.
producers, and see, like, kinda create a battle of the musicians.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, people, there's an audience for it. People absolutely have loved these television programs where you get these different artists together and then see what happens. But I just think that it's a fascination with the creative process. And in our little corner of the world, you do get to see all of the personalities and everything, but you get that end product, and you really do hear how those students either have really committed to the thing that is set forth for them to do, or how they've challenged the convention because they've listened to the previous group and they say, we want to do something different from what they did.
Right.
Yeah.
These interviews always go too fast. I mean, I could keep talking to you for another hour easily, Dr. Carson. I have a question for you
Okay.
to wrap up.
Hmm.
No pun intended. Uh, But if we were to wrap up this show with what's the biggest takeaway you would like someone to have about hip hop culture?
Yeah, I mean, I would tell folks that or to be weary of who is trying to sell you something whenever they use the words hip hop culture. And what I mean really is that hip hop is not only about things that get sold and bought. It is actually much more, for me, for sure, about the ways that people come together, the ways that people communicate with one another, the ways that people teach and learn from one another, the way that community works. And
Mhm,
because most of those things can't be turned into products,
mhm,
you are never going to see a commercial for them. You might not ever see a documentary about them. You like probably won't even see a feature film about them. But
mhm,
those are the things that I mean when I'm talking about hip hop. And it's not only about sales charts or awards or bright lights and trinkets. It is absolutely about people getting together and making something new out of what we've been given.
mhm. That's a good definition to contemplate.
Yes,
This
yes.
has been a really fantastic hour with you, Dr.
Thank you.
Carson, and I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I know I'm going to be sharing this heavily
Yes,
because
yes.
I can think of a lot of people who would really enjoy every bit of all the little nuggets of really good knowledge you shared about a cultural phenomenon that's not going away. And it's, if anything, it's getting bigger and
Yeah,
more encompassing in so many different ways.
for sure. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you making the time. And yeah, just thanks.
Everybody, this has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. I'm Diane Grissel, the host. I have been speaking with Dr. A.D. Carson, who is a hip hop professor, a musician, just basically, I'm just going to say a really thoughtful, brilliant guy who opines on a lot of different things and makes them very accessible and understandable and conversational, which is what we aim for here, to have a really good conversation about whatever that is moving the world forward and hopefully forward with greater unity and community. So thanks a lot for joining me. And we're going to move over to the green room. Hey, listen, also, there are going to be I want you to hit subscribe to this podcast at Silver Disobedience, but there's going to be all kinds of ways you can get in touch with Dr. Carson. And also, I highly recommend you pick up his book, Becoming Dope, because I have a feeling it's a winner. Talk to you soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you.